first of all, everybody, good to see you all for our season finale of this rather short version of Methods and Approaches to Teaching of Languages. It was 8 weeks instead of 16 weeks, but I still feel we got some good discussions, ideas, conversations out of this. So we're gonna finish today's course with a demo, with the last demo Thursday of this semester. As we have in the previous demos, this semester we decided to invite school teachers and a couple of college professors to share how the research they're doing is also informing their practice and how they are doing research that becomes classroom teaching, that becomes classroom practice. Because it's important for you to see the validity of developing research that is not simply to write publications, that is not simply to present at a conference, that is not simply for the traditional academic purpose, that there is an academic purpose to research that is, let's make teaching better, let's help our students learn better, let's help our communities grow. Let's help build academic community. Let's help other teachers and other students project themselves as scholars, as thinkers, as doers, as makers of meaning, and how that is also a very important function of thinking research and conducting research. So for that, today we're gonna have a fellow colleague, Gloria Gutiérrez-Arismendy. She's teaching, she'll tell you about her teaching acumen and experiences, very varied, covering teaching and the performing arts. And she's doing some really interesting stuff at the school where she is working right now. She has been, like the other folks that you had in the previous sessions, a member of the Literacies in Second Languages Project Research Lab. As you know, one of the 6 student research labs that we have at the School of Education, all 6 of them doing extraordinary, groundbreaking research. So I think all 6 of them are doing incredible work. And my invitation for all of you is to look at all 6 of them, join one of them, learn from the incredible teachers and mentors that you're gonna have in those. We have Camila, for example, is a member of LSLP who recently joined. Explore the others, talk to the professors who are leading those research labs, find out what they're doing, explore the possibility to get involved in very groundbreaking and down-to-earth research with a purpose. So that's like, I would say, the first invitation of today. LSLP is one of 6. All the ones we have at the School of Ed are incredibly good. I've seen their work. I want to give a big shout out in this video they'll get to hear it once it's on YouTube, to all the professors of the 6 of the other 5 groups. Big credit for the work they do. They are doing good research. They are actively participating in local, national, international events. They are active with outreach, social media, publications, everything in between. So learn about them and join them and get to learn more about research and how this research applies to your life and applies to your teaching life. So with that introduction, now I'm gonna leave Gloria the room. The class is yours, the microphone is yours. To everybody, as we always have, feel free to engage in conversation with Gloria. Feel free to write questions in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat. Ideally, you can turn the microphone on. If you have the webcam for in the last class and all, you can turn it on and engage in a conversation. This probably will be the last thing I'll say until I return at the end for questions and some final commentary. With that in mind, Gloria, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mora. Okay, I'm Gloria Gutiérrez. I am an English teacher. I'm also a theater teacher, and I work also as a research coordinator in a school. And this job is the result in somehow of what I've learned about research, what I am still learning. And basically what I want to share with you today is my experience as teacher, researcher, and how once I started to be part of LSLP and reading and going deeper in all those topics I was working before and I'm still working, I changed my professional life in somehow. Well, I have worked as a theater teacher. Actually I work as a theater teacher, but I am working again as a theater teacher some months ago. I'm so happy because of that. And when I started working, I remembered that everything we did was through research. And in that moment, I didn't understand research as I could understand once I finished my master. Why? Because I did what the school teach me or the school told me to do. The school always say, okay, here we are teaching based on research and you must do this or that. And I learned a lot, but somehow I was not aware about the power of research till I started to work on my dissertation. So I changed my professional life. I stopped teaching theater and I started to teach languages. When I started to teach English, I remember I wanted to prepare better because I had experience teaching art, but I didn't have experience teaching languages. That's why I wanted to study a diploma course and then the master. And thanks to that, I learned that I can use art in my classes, but also I can potentiate research at school as an approach. And why I started like combining those things, I was like first trying to be a better teacher, crossing or trying to focus on how to implement art in my classes. But then I realized that as teacher, I had a kind of experience researching at school, and now I had all that knowledge I have been building thanks to the master, but more, and I think the most important field for me is the LSLP. Why? Because there we learn how to be academical and more like an academic person, and how to continue studying, researching, and improving, and yes, transforming our teaching practices. And the way I transformed my teaching practices have been through research. So in this moment, I'm working in a school as a research coordinator, and there I have the responsibility to implement research in the whole school. And the way I'm doing it, it's a little bit different than we have been listening from the Ministerio de Educación, whatever. So I'm going to share with you that experience. But I wanted to tell you why and how I'm here doing this, because in somehow we cannot separate what we are. Like, okay, I'm a professional actress. I like theater and arts, but I'm also a language teacher, but I really passionate with research. So I started like connecting everything and trying to put it on a way to teach, or on a way to help students to potentiate their consciousness, okay, the critical consciousness. Why? Because I think that critical thinking, critical consciousness is where we must point our work if we really want to change or to improve this world. So, yes, teaching by projects, what and what for. Here's a kind of summary of what I already said. I think it's not important. So today I'm going to talk first about the aesthetic dimension of critical literacies, which is the base of the work I've been doing, and I'm trying to discover how the aesthetic dimension of critical literacies allow us to implement, to prepare scenarios, to prepare stages, multiple stages where students can potentiate that critical consciousness. And research yes, I'm going to talk about research project as at school as a methodology and how does it work. And finally, how and why I'm talking about decolonizing the curriculum. If we have time, I'm going to share with you some of the experiences through 2 videos. So I remember this is a picture I used in my master thesis, and I always try to transform it according to what I am doing, because I think that is the base of what I want to do, and I want to continue studying about it. So I'm going to try to explain you why the aesthetic dimension of critical literacy. When I talk about aesthetics, I'm talking about an expanded dimension of aesthetics, okay? It's more like a philosophical term, but not that aesthetic definition we know about beauty or ugly, no. It's just something deeper. And when we're talking about aesthetic dimension of critical literacy, it's when we're talking about the relationship that human beings build to understand the reality, how do we create bonds with our reality? How do we create bonds with the reality we are living in? And how do we transform that bonds into symbols? Therefore, here we have the semiotic dimension. So here is like, how do you interpretate the world? But here is, how do you materialize that interpretation? So in critical literacies, when we want to foster critical literacies through those dimensions, I'm sorry. I always talk like about, at the beginning, I talk only about art, but then I realized that it's not only art. Could be any stage you prepared for your student. In this case, I'm talking about research. Why? Because the way I interpret my students' needs from a methodology and approach is also a matter of aesthetics and semiotics. And how do I dispose that stage is a matter of a critical exercise to foster to potentiate in my students that critical consciousness. Okay, so I took this picture because I'm recently working on this, like trying to understand which is the dimension for research at school. What is that dimension? So here I took this picture. This is Dr. Mora's analysis. And here you can see clearly the dimension of research, qualitative research, according to the level or yes of studies. So my question is, where I can place research at school, especially when teachers don't know too much about research, especially when you say research, teachers start like, no, I don't like it, I don't know anything about it, because that word, I don't know why at school, in somehow, it's like something beyond teachers and students' possibilities, and it's always like understood in terms of university, in terms of, but not in terms of high school or even primary school or even nursery, kindergarten, no. So that's the challenge I'm facing right now. And I consider that to implement research at school is very important to understand how research works in some of those dimensions. Because if not, it's gonna be very complicated and you're not gonna know how to guide teachers and students, and you're not gonna know how to encourage them to take the risk and do things differently, okay? Because most of the times when you start working based on research at school, most of the time when you start like asking your teachers, planning based on research, what I realized is that a lot of teachers do the same class 20 times. I mean, same things for 20 years. So maybe they have only 1 year of experience, repeating the same for 20 years. But they don't like to change the way they are doing things. That happened a lot in our context. So it's a challenge to encourage them to do it differently, and to understand research as an opportunity and not as a bad experience they had at the university, or not as something that only doctors or master or university students can do. They also can do it in another dimension, of course, but they can also do it with their students. So I wanted to add this image, not because I want to go deeper here. This is, but also because this is something to consider when you are like basing your purpose in front of a consejo académico or in front of a Secretaría de Educación. Why research? And why in that way? Okay, 21st century skills talk about this, what you're watching in this moment. And yes, thanks to research, we can get it. And it's possible. So that's what I wanted to share with you, this image. Okay, I'm sure you already know about it. So research projects to potentiate. Okay, sorry. Oh my God, what happened here? Oh my God, what happened to my presentation? Okay. Okay. This is a very important part where, now, okay. So I want to tell you how research project works. I'm sorry. Okay, I want to share with you how does it work as a methodology. So I think about ABPs or proyectos de aula, and yes, they are really useful to develop content. But here, the goal is not to develop content. Here, the idea is to help students to go beyond the content and research about whatever they want to learn. That's why it is very important, the participation of students. and participation of teachers to guide the students. Because here, what teachers are going to do is to present a scenario to students to question the word. So here, the critical literacy is the base of everything, because the way you present the scenario, the way you present to your students the possibility to question the word is the clue of everything. If you are doing things as always you do it, you're not going to help your students to question the word. So, for example, one of the exercises I like to do with my students, especially 10 and 11 graders, is to visit the city. So we went to La Comuna 13, we went to the city center, we went to different places around the city, and after visiting the city, we presented them a certain kind of activities where they can reflect about that. And at the end, we analyze together, teachers and students, the experience, and they question. They question the city, they question the world. And we as teachers plan how are we gonna help them to answer. You can think like, okay, and what about classes? Sometimes they don't have classes at school. And that's something really nice, because at the end, what we are looking, or what we are just like, it's like a dream, okay? But it's not only my dream, it's also the principal and even the owner of the school, the dream that students can go to the school and just choose what they want to learn and just learn, not just trying science, theater, music, no, just go to school and learn about whatever you want. So in this moment, we are, for example, working by labs. So the whole high school are choosing different labs in different kind of topics. Astronomy, we have music, they have music classes, but they love music. Programming, robotics, different things, and they went to those labs and they developed their research with a teacher and with classmates from different ages and grades. This is a different way to research, because we are not focusing on how to develop the curriculum, how to develop content. No. Actually, the idea is to decolonize the curriculum, and maybe they are receiving less time of some classes because we need that time for research, okay? So one of the main idea, for me, the main idea, or no, it's not the main idea. The principal goal when you are researching with young people, with teenagers, with children, is to develop critical consciousness. So as I told you, the critical literacy depends in somehow on how teacher presents the scenario, how teacher prepare the scenario, and how teacher shows students how they can do things better for this world. Not just to realize, but also to make, to really make good actions to change the reality, okay? To change the context. So I have found that critical literacy and research have a lot of things in common when we are implementing this as an approach in school. One, in our school, we always talk about what and what for, to potentiate the critical consciousness. But when I talk about what, if I think about critical literacies, I'm talking about how students are reading the word. When I realized as teacher how they are reading the word, how is their aesthetic dimension, how can I read that aesthetic dimension of my students of critical literacy, then I can move or I can realize what kind of scenarios I can show to my students. I can present to my students to help them to question the word. In the same way, they can ask and they can rewrite or they can recreate the word. Because finally what we are looking for when we are potentiating critical literacies in our classroom is to transform the word. And when we are researching, we want to transform the word. Is what we are really, is our real objective when we are working on the critical literacies and research. So decolonizing the curriculum is not an easy exercise. It's like, I think it's almost impossible, okay? But try to do it, implementing research and of course, critical literacies at school. It's the way to find a path. I think we are building that path at school, and I think it's not easy, and it's not easy because, for example, teachers need to be better prepared. So we need to help teachers to prepare themselves better to face a research process with students. We need to prepare better ourselves to help teachers, to help students to research, and keeping that critical literacy as the best of everything if we want to potentiate the critical consciousness, which is not easy. Why? Because we don't know what is going to be the result of the research with students. Sometimes they just can potentiate the critical awareness, but it's not really easy to get with them to potentiate that critical consciousness. Everything is so beautiful when we are studying, but when you go there and you decided to decolonize the curriculum through research and critical literacies is not easy, because resistance is always there, and the resistance is there all the time, like teachers who prefer to do things of the same way, even if it's mandatory to work with research. Or even students, because they have listened that research is something like not easy to do. So it's a challenge, but I think it's the way. I'm sure it's the way at the moment. So here there are some students. Here we have the whole 8th graders working on the experience they lived in La Comuna 13 and the city center, and they were just answering some questions. We made different kind of activities, and in some point of the research process, we invite experts according to the topics they choose, and they receive chats. They can make another visits if they need. That is something students really love. Do you have any question? Yes. Okay, I'm going to share with you 2 videos. And okay, I'm going to share with you 2 videos. Those videos were made by students. As you know, we are now facing the lockdown, so most of the projects turn into virtual, and even though they continue working. So I'm gonna share with you some, the first one, it's about video games. 2 of those students you're gonna see in this video, they had some problems with video games, okay? So they wanted to work about it. And this is the, I think it's this one, I don't remember. And the other one, it's about, let me check if it is the video games. Yes, oh, okay. And the other one is about the last names. With this group, we visited the Cementerio San Pedro, and we visited, let me see, the principal hills in the city, and they visited some ancestral places around the city. And they were really curious about last names. They wanted to learn about their own family last name and their own family history. So I'm going to show you what we did. This is the first year working based on projects. So I could share with you videos from 2010 or 12 where you're gonna see the difference. But I think this is the last thing I did with my students. It's the first year working with them at school, and I think it's a good beginning, okay? A good beginning, so I'm gonna show you.
I mean, for me, it's always very interesting to see how people translate things that would, I mean, especially, I think it's important for students to see how they can take things they are learning in school and they can move them into the classroom, because sometimes we always have the question, what is the practical application of what we learn in class? So what is the practical, even the question that we can answer today, or that we have answered in this course through the demos, is what can you do with a master's degree?
Yeah.
I mean, like, yeah, I think, you know, that questions that we asked, what is, I think I remember one from Avenue Q, that famous Broadway
if
music.
I will answer, but yeah. If I will answer that question is like, with a master's degree, you can transform your teaching, but also you can transform yourself.
There you go.
Because yeah. It's not a matter of a title, it's a matter of how do you start understanding everything you do, and everything you dream to do with your students and with your teachers when you have to help teachers too.
And that's reason, and I like that, because again, and I was making the reference to WQ because they have this question in the musical, what can you do with an English major? And then kind of like always think about what the question, what can you do with a master's? And I think for students it's important to hear that, because even though now we have this interest and there is the push for more education, like schools now, but in both public and private schools alike, now they're kind of encouraging and even to an extent even requiring their faculty, their staff to eventually go get a master's. I mean, that in public schools it's part of something you use for promotion in the system, and even in private schools I know there is more and more pressure that their teachers get a master's degree, sometimes any master's degree, which is problematic in and of itself, because then the focus is on the piece of paper as opposed to, as you were saying, what you can do with that piece of paper. And then even the question goes further, and the question of what can you do with a PhD, which is not an automatic question with an automatic answer. Even the question of should I go for a master's, should I go for a PhD? Those are very deep questions, but I think rather than answering the question with words, I like the fact that you, in your practice and in the previous sessions that we had in the demo, they all talked about what you can do with a master's degree with actions, with proof, with evidence, with the research, but also with the teaching and how that informs all your decisions. We have one question here from Luisa, and again, I encourage everybody to either open your microphones or simply type the questions in the chat. So the question for Luisa says, changing the subjects in the school and leaving the students free to pick, has that changed students' attitudes?
Totally.
Have they got better?
Okay. I'm going to tell you that when I started working in this school, I was just mentoring the school because they wanted to transform their curriculum to a research one, okay? So I started like mentoring school and teachers about it, but later they decided to create a role, which is the research coordinator, that's me, and I invited me to be part of school. When I started working there, I told them, research at school is like when you are buying shoes. And they were like, what? Because how I call projects is PS, Proyectos de Investigación Escolar. So I say, it's like when we were like creating our own shoes, and those shoes are the research methodology we are going to implement. So this first year, we were going to do it like this. So what we did, we tried to identify according to ages certain kind of lines, like research lines. So for preschoolers, first to third grade, they were based on some research lines, okay? But at the end of this year, the results were similar what you watched some minutes ago. There are a lot of videos and beautiful things they did, but I was thinking how we have something very nice at school, which is un programa para desarrollar los PR. Do you know what is that? Programas de inclusión. So what I did, it's like creating small research groups. And I created a small group, which the name was Makers Make. Makers Make were like a robotics and video games group with an engineer that helped us to develop the project. And when I saw students so happy working on it, I thought like, okay, what happened if I try to start building maker spaces at school, but maker spaces for research? So I couldn't do everything at the same time because I was finishing the first demo of research, the first version of our shoes, and the results were like some students loved the research line we proposed, but some of them didn't like at all. So at the end of the last year, this is Calendario B, so at the end of the last year, I prepared some surveys for my students and for my teachers, and they answered what they would like to learn at school. So they answered astronomy, they answered programming, things different, totally different from what they are doing in classes. So all the labs that we now have are labs proposed by students, not by teachers. So students are now working on labs, their projects, and working on what they really want, They don't have like, okay, let's brainstorm about a topic related with city. Brainstorm, no. They want to learn how to program video games. They are going to do it. And they are going to develop under research methodology with an expert guiding them. So yes, the answer is they are really happy doing it. They are doing it better. And most important here is this is the result of their what they want to do. And as I told you, it's not easy. But because, for example, not all the teachers know how to do certain kind of things they want to do. So we have to prepare ourselves better to guide them better, to help them to do what they want. Yes, they are doing it better. And here there is another cons. Do you ever do this kind of activities in a public school? Yes, I work for a year in a public school in Envigado, but I had to do it by myself in my classes because we didn't have a group of teachers. And here planning together, here working with your colleague is important because there are something that we call when we're working proyectos de aula, que es lo que hacen los colegios públicos, which is really cool because we're doing it at school too. We transverse the curriculum. Okay, teachers need to integrate or the word we were talking about the last week, transverse the project through the subject. It means in my subject, English or maths, I'm going to develop part of the project. That is the transverse process. And it doesn't happen in the public school I work. I don't know if there are other schools that are doing it. Here in this school I'm working, they transverse, not the research projects by labs, but the research project in itself, because labs is just one part of what we're doing. We also develop proyectos de aula and proyectos de investigación escolar in their classes and to develop the content, to develop the curriculum, those modelos, okay? Two methodologies, to develop the content and to decolonize the curriculum. In both of them, the subjects need to be articulated, but when you are working research projects, you integrate subjects, but when you work in to develop the curriculum, you don't integrate. You need to transverse the research process. In a public school, it's really difficult to do it. And teachers in the public school I work, I know there are really good public schools where for sure they are doing this kind of things and better. Why? I'm sure because I am not, in this moment we are in a process to be part of MOVA. MOVA has a net of public schools and they are called labs. And those labs that are schools, public schools, all of them were based on projects. Different methodologies, different experiences, a little small group of teachers developing research with students, they already are part of MOVA. We are in the process to be part of MOVA too. So yes, it's possible, not because I left in the school I work, but because what I left in MOVA, because I visit MOVA a lot and I saw there a lot of public schools really focus on research. Not any other questions?
I don't know. Thank you, Gloria. Any other questions, folks? And I actually wanted to jump in and add something to the question about public schools. And again, if for people who will be watching this once it's on the YouTube channel, one part of the answer to this question, you're gonna find that when you go back and look at the Demo Thursday by Monica Lopez Ladino. Monica is a school teacher in a public school. And her work and what she has done is very similar to what Gloria is doing in terms of taking her research and her theory and moving it into her classroom. And we do have in our, shameless plug here, but in our research lab, we also have researchers in public schools, at least 3 or 4 of them, who are implementing ideas from their research and into the classroom. So the idea that you can transform and decolonialize the curriculum. And it's important to point out that the idea of decolonizing the curriculum, it's what Gloria is doing is part of a much larger and collective effort that is happening in schools in Colombia and around the world. But in the case of the language teaching community in Colombia, we can give a nice shout out to some incredible scholars who are already engaging in this conversation on every level. Like at the national, international level, we have people like Yesiel Ortega finishing his doctorate at the University of Toronto, doing some really interesting work in decolonizing curriculum in public schools in Bogota. Then we have the work of Carlos Granados in Bogota. We have the work of Nancy Carvajal, a professor at UPTC in Tunja, and how she has, through her research group, she has done this, a similar line of inquiry about how we decolonialize the curriculum, how we do this. And then we have other ideas in language education and in language studies in general that are questioning this idea of who gets to do research, who gets to say what counts as research, who gets to say what counts as language, who gets to say what we call language. And that is an important consideration for how we should teach English in the future, that we need to decolonialize the curriculum, and we need to decentralize knowledge production, and we have to decenter language use. Those are big questions that you, students in this class, and the young teachers watching this webinar at some point, you will have to tackle. How do we decolonialize the curriculum in the sense of how we allow students to take stock in their learning process and use the language for things that matter, and then think about the implications of instructional practices that we carry out every single day. I wonder if there's any other questions. We have two very good questions, but we have a lot of students in this class. So does anybody have another question? Anything you want to ask Gloria? Anything you want to comment on this presentation? Anything at all? Let's give them a moment or two to either open their microphones or ask you a question in the chat.
Teacher, there is a question from Camila up there.
Yes.
Actually, she was the first one.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. So, yes, Gloria, there is a very good question here from Camila. How is the process of doing the research and implementing the research in your class? For example, you give them some tips about how to do research.
The idea is not just like, it depends. I'm thinking about the whole school, because at school I have some English classes, but most of the times I am charged to help teachers to implement research. So the most important thing is to prepare the scenario in general for your students to question, okay? So if, for example, they want to learn about urban life, which is one of the labs, urban life, they can ask questions about it, but you need to prepare the scenario. It means you need to prepare meaningful activities for your students to provoke the need to question. Because the brainstorm activity, I think, doesn't work too much, because students tend to repeat what the leaders of the group says. So we try to plan activities where they can express in a creative way. We use a lot of visual arts for this part of the process, like drawing, like performing, after a specific pedagogical experience, like visiting a museum, or visiting some places in the city, or receiving a chat from an expert, that kind of activities. And then we try to help them to question. Once they start to question, I help teachers to organize those questions into a research question. but we don't say students, no, that's not a research question, sorry. It doesn't work because they are just learning how to question the word. And if we start like talking about research as a rigorous process from the beginning, they're gonna enjoy the process. So we as teachers know and we have clear idea how to do step by step with students, helping them, but we don't name things like, okay, now we're gonna start with the conceptual framework part. And no, we plan meaningful activities to help them and to guide them, and then they start to building, and finally we organize with them the information. So here the role of the teacher is very important. That's how we do it. But we don't do it, this what I'm talking about is the projects outside the curriculums. Projects inside the curriculum, proyectos de aula o ABPs, how we do it, it's during the classes. So there is a leader, teacher leader, who asks students about what they would like to research this year. So the first period, they are defined like, yes, they are like, just like, defining what are they going to research about it. Once they have the topic, the general topic chosen, the teacher leader in order to develop the project. They plan it with other teachers he considered can help him to develop the project. It means this teacher, I am the social studies teacher, the leader to develop the proyecto de aula or ABP with my students. I have to plan not only my third period subject, taking care, I'm going to develop the content of the curriculum through this project, but also I'm going to determine which subjects can be implicated to develop that project. So this is a method of working thing with a leader, okay? That's how they do it. They work in proyectos de investigación escolar, or PA, call them, they do it differently. They have a leader and a small group of students working around a project. And this small group of students are from different ages and grades. That's how we do it. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Any other questions? We still have a little bit of time, and again, lots of opportunities to ask questions before we end this. Anybody else? Does anybody have any other question? Well, definitely, those are three very good questions.
Something very important here is to highlight the importance of teachers' preparation. We have a certain long sessions of studying about research with teachers and how to implement research with students without involving students in that academic thing like you have to research. No, it's just like provoke, it's just to provoke to students to ask. And the way we're gonna do it is a way of. Another question, what about failed projects?
Yeah, what about failed projects? What about failed projects? Have you ever had one? Is there the possibility of modification?
Ah, yes, all the time. And with students all the time. And actually this is I think it's the worst part of implementing this with teachers, because they got really sad. No, yeah, you know, it doesn't work. Students want to change the topic, say, change it. We don't have time. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Most important is to them to do something they really like. I mean, the most important is, okay, teacher, we don't like this project anymore. We don't want to listen more about it. Okay, why? You can talk with them, like listen to them if it's just a crisis, a kind of crisis, or they really want to change, or this really something is not gonna work. So it's something not gonna, for example, the last year, 10th graders, they didn't do nothing. I mean, they didn't do what they have to do. They just were lost. No, we don't like, we hate it, and they didn't do it. And I say to my colleagues, it doesn't matter. Thanks, it happens because we need to do things differently next year. We can do the same with that group. We need to do something different. So yes, it happens a lot. And it's pretty common, especially when you're starting to do something like this. And in a school they didn't, they haven't done before.
Yeah, and I think, let me add to that. I mean, about the failed projects. One of the things we learn when we do research is how many projects fail, or how sometimes projects don't go in the direction you first desired. And I think it's important to also learn to accept the fact that sometimes you're going to propose ideas and they're going to be rejected. And that in many cases, the amount of rejections you're going to get, it's going to be equal or higher to the amount of successes you're going to have. That because it happens. Sometimes you submit a paper for a conference and it gets rejected. Sometimes you write an article and it gets rejected. You can write a proposal for research, for funding for research, and it gets rejected. And when you are in this kind of scholarly work, rejection, it's part of it. It's part of life. And it doesn't mean that your work is wrong or that your work is bad. It doesn't mean that you're not good. It doesn't mean that you failed, you're a failure. It just means that, I mean, there are so many things that happen. Sometimes you submit papers for a conference, like any big conference, and you can submit 3, submit 4, and then you get only one accepted. I've had years when I have submitted for ARA, the biggest conference in the world, and I have submitted like 3 or 4 papers, and I got 4. None of them got accepted. And the first time it happened, you're like, okay, kind of, oh, it sucks. And over time, you kind of realize that it just happened. I mean, there are so many other factors that are not necessarily that you're not good, that have an effect on this.
And I think the first thing that happened to me when I started to work on this is facing the rejection of teachers to this process. They didn't want, most of them, some of them, they really love it, but they didn't want at the beginning. And I remember a conversation with my boss, and she told me, like, what are we gonna do? I say, I answer, it's possible. It's a really big possibility that this is not gonna work, but I'm not scared. If it doesn't work, we can do something else. And if that other thing doesn't work, we can try with something else. But if we don't try, how can we realize if it's gonna work or not?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, always keep that in mind, that your projects, when you develop them and when you're doing like school research, and you think it's a very good idea, you have to run it. And if it doesn't work, then you have to continue. And there will be resistance to this. But resistance is also a normal part of growth. Sometimes people are resistant because they're scared. Sometimes people are resistant to ideas not because they don't want to do it, maybe because they don't know where to start, because they have never tried it before, so they don't know if it's going to be a good idea. But give people a chance to express those fears, give people a chance to be scared for a moment, and then build together. And I think that can make these ideas of bringing research into schools and make research part of your teaching endeavor a lot more manageable, I think. All right, so with that, I think we're gonna stop right here. But first, I want to thank Gloria for her ideas, her insight, everybody for the questions.
And thank you for the invitation.
It's a pleasure, and again, thank you to the previous presenters we had in this small series of LSLP session. For everybody, just as always, continue following us on our YouTube channel where we have the LSLP session webinars, because there will be more and more things coming. We'll have a few more surprises for the end of the year and for next year. So stay with us. Gloria, once again, my gratitude to everybody. The students, I'm going to ask you to stay. I'm going to stop the recording, and then I'm going to ask you to stay for a couple of more minutes because we have to do some closing. Thank you very much. And Gloria, have a very good afternoon.
Okay, thank you so much. Bye-bye. And if you need something else, you know, I'm going to be here.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Gloria.